allegiance?
That's okay. We can just pledge. We'll just be doing it.
There's a flag behind me.
All right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
What's that? Sure.
Mr. Mayor, I do have a brief announcement, or actually special delivery before we get started. So of course, the city's fiscal year 2019-20 budget has been approved since July 1st, but we finally just got the final shipment of hard copies of the budget. So Lisa Lopez, your Administrative Services Director, is here to officially give each one of you your copy of the budget for this fiscal year.
Thank you, Lisa.
We thought this was the easiest way to do it since you're all here. We'll get Councilmember Isom separately.
It's a heavy budget. If anybody wishes to speak about any item that's not on the agenda, and we only have one item on tonight's agenda, please feel free to fill out a blue card. Seeing none, entertain a motion about the consent calendar. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The one item on our agenda for tonight is an ordinance, emergency ordinance. It's the 2019 Heritage Main Street Urgency Interim Ordinance prohibiting specified new uses on the 300, 400, 500, and 600 blocks of Main Street. May we have a staff presentation, please?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, and community members. I'm Jill Ekus. I'm the Community Development Department Director. I'm happy to be here tonight. I want to, first of all, thank Council for coming out for this extra meeting. We know you've already had a late meeting this week, and thank you. We obviously believe this matter is very important and timely, and so thank you for coming. All right, we're going to cover the following items in the presentation tonight, give a little background, an overview of this urgency ordinance that is in your packet, cover next steps. This is a public hearing item. You will be holding a public hearing and then taking action. Before I start, however, with background, because these interim urgency ordinances do not come around all that often, I'd like to give the city attorney a moment to describe what these are, how they work, and what their purpose is.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jill. So these types of ordinances are authorized under state law. The provision is Government Code Section 65858, and it allows jurisdictions to adopt temporary urgency ordinances where there are urgent situations that affect the public safety, health, and welfare. And there are specific characteristics of these ordinances that allow jurisdictions to use this expedited process, because of course normally ordinances require a first reading and a second reading and go into effect 30 days later. The ordinance before you this evening, if you adopt it, will go into effect immediately. It is, however, only only in effect for 45 days, but then can be extended for another 10 months and 15 days. And if that is not enough time, then you will have another opportunity to extend it for up to 1 more year. So these types of ordinances can only be in place for 2 years maximum. And the other important characteristic of these types of ordinances is they require a 4/5 vote So in other words, we were not able to take this ordinance before you on Tuesday night. There were, of course, only 3 of you, and I don't think it was quite all worked up at that point anyway. And some of the urgencies have really been, which Jill will explain, have come to our attention recently. So, of course, it would need all 4 of you to vote in favor. If less than that, then it would not pass. And I guess the final thing I would just mention, and Jill will get into this a little bit in her presentation, is that these types of ordinances are specifically to prohibit any use that is in conflict with a contemplated zoning proposal that the city is considering or studying or intending to study. And so Jill's presentation will describe that process in place right now. Any other questions on the legal side before I hand it back off to Jill?
All right, thank you, Catherine. So that is exactly the starting point for our presentation, is to be real clear that this is being brought forward tonight not in isolation. We are, in fact, have been working on a code amendment for downtown. We worked with the Planning Commission in a very full-bodied study session back in July regarding uses in downtown, including ground floor uses on Main Street, and well beyond the scope of actually what the focus of this urgency ordinance is tonight. And I can tell you a little bit more about that at the end of this presentation. The presentation is short, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page. There's some terms and concepts that are simple, and I think everybody will be mostly familiar with them, but I just want to make sure that we're clear about the language that we're using. And we'll also be, for part of the background, taking a look at the existing conditions of the ground floor of Main Street between Pilarcitos Creek and Correa Street. So the concern is about maintaining the city's key, prime, heritage, downtown, pedestrian-oriented shopping area. And the way this is really thought about in the planner world is about active uses. And the pragmatic way to think of those is it's all about foot traffic. An active use is going to need foot traffic, and it's going to inspire foot traffic. It also needs to be ground floor dependent. A way to think about that is the opposite of that definition. If a use is ground floor dependent, it's not going to choose an upstairs location. We're not going to find a cafe upstairs in Half Moon Bay. We're not going to find a retail shop upstairs. Those kinds of upstairs restaurants are very few and far between. They're like at the top of a hotel or something. We're focused on ground floor dependent uses. They choose the ground floor for reasons. And then there's passive uses. They could locate in all kinds of places. They have lots of options. They could be on what we call the B street, like Church or Parisma or Johnston, or side streets. They can be upstairs and do just fine. They don't have to be on the ground floor of your Heritage Main Street. They like it. It's nice. I have an office on the ground floor near Heritage, and we'll talk about City Hall. We'll use it as an example in a minute. But you don't have to be there if it's a passive use of this nature. So that's just the basic cut of the concept. So let's look at a few examples, and we will start with us because it illustrates kind of the range of where things are black and white and gray about what's an appropriate ground floor use in downtown. So we have, let's see, we've got this challenging area over here where the sun comes in real hard and we've got our windows covered. You'll see that we are not the only office-oriented use that does that. That's really typical, and that's a challenge for pedestrians. It creates a gap in the streetscape. We also have a surface parking lot with a curb cut that crosses over the pedestrian sidewalk Now, that's not something we're going to get at with this urgency ordinance right now, but this is something that your staff has been working on in your code amendment, to not have those kinds of things happen anymore and figuring out ways to phase them out. At the same time, this is the side of the building that I'm very proud of because that's our community development department side. We intentionally keep our shades up, and we do have a public counter. This is something that we talk about as staff. We know that we're a challenging use on Main Street. We're in the 100% corner of Kelly. Kelly and Main is just in the heart of the heart. We do have a little bit of active use because folks come in and on a regular basis, they go back out and have lunch. They come in with cups of coffee. And so there's a piece of that going on with what we're doing, but we are completely closed on Saturday and Sunday. This would be a better brew pub with a beer garden next to it, right? So we don't want to pick on anybody, and it's no one's, it's not the focus of this because our code has allowed this, and we also have past practice, and we have historic uses, heritage uses, I should say. So what's up with office? And these are just some of the examples, and you see window coverings, and we just don't see a lot of traffic going in and out of those doors. And they're great uses. We like all the businesses. This is not anything about any particular business or use. It's just about where it is, and creating some more of these spans along the frontage that are not active or engaging for our residents and visitors who come downtown for a stroll. Here's the third example, and I think it's just really important for people to understand. I'm sure everyone in the room has fond memories of dining in the old Pasta Moon restaurant, and we're happy for them in their new location. I watch, staff and I, we look at all the listings. We look at LoopNet and all the listings, and we like to know how properties are being marketed. We're interested in what they're going for. We look at for sale, we look at for lease. I was happy to see that this is being marketed for lease as retail, restaurant, retail space available, it says right up here. But here's the challenge we have. It's being also acknowledged that office could be allowed here. And that's true right now. The code as it is right now does allow that. And there's no limit to how many offices you could end up with someday on Main Street, the way the code is set up. Which frankly, I've done one of these before, and it worked out well. It takes some time, but it worked out great. But it takes so many years to get the conversion back to what you're looking for, because leases can be very long, which is why when we see things like this, it is urgent. We've had 2 recent conversions from retail to office uses, and you're vulnerable for more. So we also included attachment to your staff report with the underground details of this, but we've, as of the end of December, this is what we found on Main Street, these 4 blocks. We counted active uses in terms of their linear frontage, and then we looked at non-active uses. We also looked at some of those are vacancies, are included in that number. Parking lots are included in that number, and unactivated spaces that are causing gaps are included in that number. City Hall is in that number, so is our parking lot. That's really high, 42%, over 40%, and it doesn't seem like that sometimes because we get used to certain businesses having the shade drawn or whatever it is. But if you go up and down those 4 blocks, both sides of the street, with a real intent of looking at what's there and can I go in or out of this business? Would I tell my friend to come and meet me here? You'll see the gaps become really, really evident. So what does this urgency ordinance do? It's very narrow. It specifically prohibits uses that are not active ground floor dependent only on those 4 blocks, only on the ground floor of Main Street. It's really targeted. We're not trying to go all over downtown and have retail on the ground floor all over downtown. It's not realistic. When you have vacant space, we don't want to bleed that out. So there's a lot more thinking that has gone into this for the longer term ordinance. But this is your sweet spot, and it's acknowledged in the zoning code right now as being a really important 4 blocks in different ways. These 4 blocks, we've called them Heritage Main Street. They actually are the development pattern's different for them. These are the ones that most of the buildings have almost a 0 setback to the sidewalk. This is where your classic 2-story commercial buildings are located, most of them. This is really the concentration of that development pattern. One, just crossing Correas to the south, and we have a completely different development form. It's more of a house setback relationship. And some of those buildings are being used for retail on the ground floor. Most of them are not. And so it's a pretty distinct transition point. Going back to what this does, the prohibition is defined, and then there's a definition of active ground floor dependent. It's in your staff report. It's also in the ordinance. And there's a definition for Heritage Main Street. Why do we call it Heritage Main Street and not historic? A lot of people like the reference to historic, and we do too. But for a code, we chose not to use it because historic has some other kinds of weight associated with it. This is not a defined and adopted historic district. So we didn't want to blend the terms and mix that up. So we chose a distinct term. And frankly, this term was born out of the Planning Commission's discussions through the land use plan work. Former Commissioner Evans was working on this. So we've tried to pull from a lot of the work that we've been doing with your commission and your community. So we are very interested in hearing what community members, hopefully downtown business folks, have to say tonight. We're eager to learn more about this. Want to reassure them that we're working on the long-term code amendment, and that's really active, and you may have gotten the public hearing notice because we're going to see the Planning Commission on Tuesday with a draft of this code that we've been working on since July. It's going to be a bit more nuanced and think about some of the things that you see, like, well, here's another vacancy that we worry about. Typical, again, the covered windows, you see a lot of that. This kind of undefined space, we're going to take that on a little bit in the code to encourage transitions over time to making a lot more fun out of things like that. What do you do about banks? They are active, like right here with the ATM. We're not going to bring banks forward in those 4 blocks for having a new bank. We don't think you're going to have a big push for a new bank in that area, but we think this is a good time to not bring that forward. So those are things you'll see in that code next week. But what you have tonight is really focused to be protective, to, while we're finishing that code work, not have any more conversions. It's eroding. Next steps, if you do adopt this tonight, we're going to come back and ask you to extend the ordinance for the 10 months and 15 days as the city attorney described, because your next meeting is more than 45 days away. from this one tonight, and we don't want to have a gap while we're working so hard on the code. And then, of course, back to what we're doing on Tuesday. We'll be here at 7 o'clock with the Planning Commission. And we're looking at, depending on how that goes with the commission, we would try to come to you as soon as we can to bring the fully developed code, and remembering we needed the urgency ordinance time extension because this is part of your local coastal land use plan, LCP, and it has to be certified by the Coastal Commission before it's part of your zoning. And this is out of your staff report. This is our recommendation to adopt this ordinance, and if you have clarifying questions, we're happy to field those now. Otherwise, you will be having a public hearing with this item. Thank you.
Are there any clarifying questions? If not, I will open the public hearing. Oh. Fill out a speaker card and, yeah. Yeah.
How about now? Yeah. My question is that in the expert's opinion on this, where do they see the businesses going? Do they see a, do we as a town need to start thinking about setting up other areas that would be better for businesses?
Jill, are you willing to briefly answer the question?
I think we should wait for all of your public hearings so that we can answer it as a whole.
Oh, that's
Okay.
good. Thank you. Your question will be answered. The first public speaker at our public hearing is Crystalline Geet, followed by Colleen Hensey.
Thank you very much, Council. Crystalline, the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. And I am here on behalf of two members that are both for this ordinance. One of them had sent me an email, and I will read it to you now. Dear council members, we would like to submit to you our agreement to the request that all street front properties on Main Street in downtown Half Moon Bay be limited to retail or food service establishments, etc., as put forth this evening by this collective participant and the members of the council. Thank you kindly, Betsy and George from It's Italia. And then I also had a conversation with a member who actually does not fit within the criteria of the new ordinance and is, however, located on Main Street. And he mentioned that he had appreciation for the fact that this ordinance does grandfather in businesses that are currently on Main Street. Might not fit the criteria, but they are not going to be forced to leave. So he feels secure and was not worried, but did have appreciation for that consideration. Over the last couple of months, this conversation has bubbled up a couple of times. I've had multiple chamber members be in support of such an amendment, as they do want to see downtown Main Street be a very fun place to go for residents, so that they have a place to hang out at night or after school or after work, and they would like to see the downtown open spaces get filled with more things to do. And I think this ordinance supports that very nicely. So, thank you.
Thank you, Crystalline. Colleen, followed by Robin Dunlap.
Hi, I'm Colleen Henney, and I am the secretary on the board of the Downtown Association, and I also have a gallery on Main Street on the more southern end by Correas. You know, I think this issue is really about basic zoning. A lot of cities have zones like this where it's retail only. And I think that it has a huge impact on our sort of charming downtown area. It doesn't affect the whole downtown. It's only 4 blocks of, you know, the main area of our main street. And I think if we don't pass some sort of a zoning law like this, that we're going to see our small shops go away. We're going to see our small businesses go away as competition comes in with, you know, bigger Silicon Valley companies and agencies, law firms, not to pick on anybody. But I think, you know, those are the people that can afford high rents. And I think we're going to see rents really skyrocket if we don't do something to protect, you know, small businesses that serve not only our community members, but visitors. I wanted to read a statement from a retailer that she asked me to speak on her behalf, Rachel Orletan from Abode. And she says, as most of us are well aware, small town areas all over the country have been struggling for several decades now due to the emergence of strip malls and big box corporate entities taking over. Still, people love a good main street and are in fact craving that small town, personal, unique mix of individual shops and restaurants that only small downtown areas are able to provide. In recent years, there has been a social recommitment to shopping small, but how can consumers do this if we don't offer them a downtown full of beautiful shops and restaurants? By allowing service-oriented businesses such as real estate, lawyers, etc., in a retail district, we are doing a disservice to our local merchants and surrounding community. Downtown Half Moon Bay needs to be a shopping, eating destination in order to bring people here. Windows, signage, awnings for retail and restaurants only are all visually crucial to a thriving shopping, eating district. As a community, we need to capitalize on this opportunity to begin revitalizing downtown Half Moon Bay. Step 1 is supporting this proposed retail restaurant ordinance in the heart of downtown. If we build it, they will come. Thank you, Rachel Orletan from Abode.
Thank you, Colleen. Robin Dunlap, followed by Bruce Jones.
Hello, I'm Robin Dunlap. I am the law office owner of 508 Main Street. I think what's most concerning about this zoning ordinance is the sense of the word urgency. I don't believe that there is a sense of urgency here, and it seems to be put forth haphazardly in front of the committee when there are other actions that could be done that could help solve these problems without infringing on people's property rights. One of the very concerning things that I saw in this presentation was in regards to Pasta Moon. I do not know who the owners of the building of Pasta Moon are, but I would imagine if this were to be adopted, that most likely they're going to have a hard time selling their business or leasing it out to another company. I assume that it would hopefully be rented out as a restaurant since they have restaurant facilities already inside, but if not, I wonder about where this comes into eminent domain. I don't do constitutional law, but when you reduce the value of someone's property, then you're doing a government taking of what their property is. For example, if I can't sell my office for the $850,000 that I bought it for, because now it has to be a storefront, and let's say I could only sell it for $650,000, where are you guys gonna come up with that $200,000 that I just lost? Or the $60,000 that I just put into the office to turn it into office? I can now not turn around and release this property to somebody else who wants to run it as an office. So that's a concern. I also think that it's incredibly short-sighted. I came here from Maryland. I lived in another very small town called Damascus, Maryland, with 11,000 people. My law office was there as well, on Main Street, different number, but still on Main Street, also in a historic district. I had the community, I was part of the community. My office was on Main Street. It was a historical area. We had the agricultural fair. I was in the parade every year. I offered free legal clinics to people who needed help. I've always had an interest in public service. and left my office doors open for those that were in need. I think that a law office can offer those things, and it's short-sighted to think that they can't, that it can only be retail which creates a community. It certainly is not true. It wasn't true in my past. I had not only that, but I would coach debate teams. I had several interns from the high school that would come and work in my office. I was an integral part of the community, which I would hope to be so here. And I think that it should be open for anyone who wants to have a professional office, but then also wants to be part of the community. I think what's more important is that we want somebody who's in the community that's community driven. And you can't guarantee that by requiring that it be a retail shop. You can't guarantee that by requiring that it be a restaurant. You can have those people that aren't adequately serving the community based on who they are. Now, one of the things that I found interesting is the first time that I knew about this was from Facebook. I have not had one community member reach out and say, Robin Dunlap, what can you do for Half Moon Bay? How can we help you? I have not had one person do that. Yet the first time that I've heard of this issue was on a Facebook post yesterday where my office has posted up saying, we need to get people like this out of Half Moon Bay. I think that's incredibly short-sighted. I can be an incredible benefit to Half Moon Bay. So could other business professionals. And I think it's a matter of what the individual is willing to do, not what is just made to be a specific type of business.
Thank you, Robin. Bruce Jones?
Hi, I'm Bruce Jones. I live on Pierce-Smith Creek. I used to have an office downtown. Harvey visited a couple times back for a different thing. And my children love downtown. We run around and we do different things with the toy store, had a scavenger hunt and things like that. So I'm generally in favor of this. However, I do think that we need to do a little bit more sort of, how does this fit into the bigger picture of planning? And I think that one of the things that we're missing here is professional space, professional co-working space, incubating space for businesses, weekday use. It is really quiet during the week here. We have a really different usage of weekend versus weekday, and I would love to see more people downtown weekdays that are visiting restaurants and working downtown and a thriving professional life downtown. So as we do, and I'd also like to see handicapped access so we don't have to force everybody upstairs that may not be able to get up there. So I would like to hear the experts' recommendation on when they've done this successfully in other cities, how do you then get the right mix of industry, professional, food, services, shopping, so that it's a vibrant downtown 7 days a week. Let's see what else here. Yeah, that basically covers it. But if we could somehow tie in with this a proposal for, turning one of these vacant places into a co-working space or an incubator, I think that would be wonderful. Right now, my wife, when she works from home occasionally, and right now she has to go and rent a room at the library. So there's people that I know that are doing job interviews from the library, who are using library offices to do work downtown. We have a probably huge stay-home working community that we need to give them some professional space.
Thank you, Bruce, and I'm glad I suddenly recognize you from the old days. Bring it back to council.
So I'm very concerned about this concept of grandfathering, because one of the businesses is on a key corner of our main street, next to one of our community parks. And I don't want to lose the option of having like a diner with a takeout window, or restaurant, or retail at that location in the future. And I believe the community can make those decisions about their values for downtown and what they want to see, what their vision is. So my vision isn't a law office on that corner, and I'd be perfectly, in fact, I parked in front of there to go to a meeting at City Hall, and I was staggered to see a law office on that corner. I just did not anticipate that. I anticipated a fun restaurant with a window, takeout, and all that stuff. sorry. So I'm not in favor of permanently grandfathering in office at that location. I'm just not. I'm not going to go there. So if there's some other way to, not put her at some sort of risk without actually grandfathering in the current zoning, I might consider that. But right now, I support the direction we're going in. And to Bruce Jones' point, the city's goals has been to make downtown vibrant and not just some retail on Main Street, but to bring more housing downtown, to allow for office at the appropriate location so that people can, live, work, and play downtown. I mean, that's our motto. And right now, the zoning and the uses we have, are nice, but they're not getting us where we want to be. So we're thinking your direction as well. But so I totally support staff with the exception that I do not favor grandfathering in office uses on these key down, first floor locations. I just can't support that.
Yeah, I am in favor. Did you want to say something, Jill?
Well, we wanted to have a chance to respond to that because it came up in public comment and now it's come up again. And I'm going to share from the planning side of it, and then Catherine can opine on the legal side. In drafting the suite of ordinance amendments that we're bringing to the Planning Commission on Tuesday, and by the way, those will be published on Friday. That packet will go out tomorrow. I wanted to find the strongest ability to turn over different uses, and we've got some boundaries around what we can do. So I just want to set expectations around that, and reassure you, though, that all the legal research that's needed for that has been done, and we understand your intent. We agree with your intent. And so we're serious about trying to figure out how to deal with that, but there are limitations to it.
I'll just embellish a little bit in terms of legal limitations. Oh, I think it's on. Oh, I was just closer. There we go. So the law is generally quite protective of property rights, and that's why non-conforming uses are allowed to continue as non-conforming uses until they are abandoned. And under our code right now, that requires the property be vacant for 6 months. There are some codes that have amortization provisions, which basically would phase out a property, but the ones that I typically see are anywhere between 5 and 20 years. And there is generally a right to a hearing for any property owner that is being basically phased out, to give an opportunity to present evidence that they still haven't recouped their investment. So the law is just generally quite protective. Those are some examples in both our local ordinance and then also state law that are protective. And so in Jill's package that she's taking to the Planning Commission next week, we have those things in mind. Before you tonight, though, is a much narrower decision. The prohibition is just on any new uses during this interim period.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I pretty much agree with Councilmember Bruddock. I am thrilled that you're in town. I love the idea that you are an active part of the community and want to be. I'd love to see you upstairs at Cunha's grocery store, for instance. I think that would be a lovely spot. There are too few storefronts available in these 4 blocks of Main Street, and our downtown suffers because of it. I don't know how we would phase out existing uses. I'd like to see some sort of phasing out.
I don't, I don't know how we do that legally, obviously, but you have to be fair to the person who owns the property. That's absolutely true. On the other hand, if we want to preserve what we have in Half Moon Bay and make it better, then we need more places like Cunha's grocery store. We need more places like Abode. We don't need more professional spaces. We certainly don't want any big retailers coming in, any big boxes coming in. We've had a few of those come in, and they don't do terribly well, and they leave. But I'm sorry you're in the pickle you're in, but, that's my opinion. No.
Well, first, I really like to applaud and appreciate staff for, one, recognizing that we had a issue that has been, use the word creeping. It's a creepy word in and of itself, but I didn't realize that 42%, that is a large number. And it just starts to sneak up on us. And slowly, and now, of course, that you mentioned it, you've given me a new filter. I'm probably going to notice every window that's shuttered, because that's how our brains tend to work. So I'll be much more cognizant of it. And I liked what you said about the, what attracts a lot of foot traffic and makes it active. And that is retail. I mean, that's what a great high street looks like on the ground floor. Attracts a lot of foot traffic. And we have a reputation. When people talk about Half Moon Bay, they say, wow, what an unbelievable, beautiful, quaint downtown. You don't see towns like that anymore. You don't see a lot of chain stores. I mean, we are very deliberate about trying to maintain that character for people who live here and people who come to visit. And I think that's the broader context. I also would like to say I really have a lot of faith and trust staff to be fair in this process and accommodate folks who may have existing businesses. Sometimes there's a business that owns a building outright or may have purchased a particular business that happens to be located in a building that still has a landlord and is being leased. There's many iterations, of what that could look like. And I imagine we will come up with a fair process that leads us to the goal that we want, but also doesn't put undue burdens on existing folks. So I trust that we will approve that kind of process that feels fair.
The reason I believe that this is an urgency is that there are spaces that are being advertised in these only 4 blocks. Now, that's important to understand. We're not talking about any area outside these 4 blocks. So the idea of incubators and law offices and places where people can be interviewed, that's all good. But for these 4 blocks, I agree with what I've heard, that we really want to preserve our small-town character, and this ordinance does that. And the reason it's urgent is that there are stores that are, or storefronts that are right now being advertised. And if we can see that we'll keep them as the active uses that Jill has mentioned, I think would be we're down to the quality of our what's the word? Heritage downtown. So I'm in favor of this ordinance.
I also just wanted to say that I think we have a very unique town. This is a town where the staff cares what downtown Half Moon Bay looks like. You don't see that in a lot of cities. The council always cares because the council lives there. but a lot of our staff don't actually live in Half Moon Bay, and they give a damn. They really do care. And I'm so impressed by that and so thankful for it. So thank you.
In that vein, I also want to talk about how the community cares about downtown and cares about Main Street. And Bev Cunha is here, who helped establish the Half Moon Bay Beautification Committee, who contributed money and time, and still does, in keeping McDougal Park, clean and attractive. So we have a very engaged community, a very large volunteer base, and downtown has been a focus of a lot of their efforts and will continue to be, I hope. So we're a strong community, we have strong values, and care about each other. So I think downtown is sort of emblematic of that, and I'm very proud of it, and I just want to say thank you to staff for your hard work on this. I think it's a good move. Thank you.
May I have a motion, please?
I move that we direct staff to prepare follow-up zoning text amendments subject to ongoing community input, oversight.
Councilmember Reddick, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just realized that our slide includes parts 2 and 3 of the staff recommendation, but it doesn't include the first of the 3. So if you don't mind referring to your agenda for the 3 part, I just caught that.
Page 2 of the agenda.
Yeah, I move that we number 1, adopt an urgency ordinance, 2019 Heritage Main Street Urgency Ordinance, for an initial 45-day period to limit new uses on the 300, 400, 500, and 600 blocks of Main Street between Pillarcitos Creek and Correa Street to restaurants, retail, and other qualifying uses that are active ground floor dependent uses. 2, direct staff to prepare follow-up zoning text amendments subject to ongoing community input, oversight of the Planning Commission, adoption by City Council, and conveyance to the California Coastal Commission for certification. And 3, direct staff to return to Council on December 17th, 2019, so it may consider extending the 2019 Heritage Main Street Urgency Ordinance for up to 10 months, 15 days, to provide adequate time for Coastal Commission certification of the follow-up zoning text amendments.
I'll second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Brownstone,
Aye.
Councilmember Penrose,
Aye.
Councilmember Ruddick,
Aye.
Mayor Rarbach,
Yes.
4-0.
This meeting is adjourned. All right. Oh, Joe has, sorry.
If you'll give us a couple more minutes, we thank you for that. We take this very seriously, and we will pursue and follow your direction on this. But there are a few things that came up in your discussion and at the podium that we believe it's just, while folks are still in the room, it's always helpful to be clear about the record, and I just want to make sure council has good information on the record. First of all, I want to be real clear with folks who have been coming onto Main Street in the last few months, including one of the speakers you heard tonight. I have been telling them that this ordinance is coming, not the urgency one, but that we were working on our zoning, including a representative of the person who spoke about the law office. And in no uncertain terms did I describe that this use that they were buying the building to host was going to become non-conforming if this code was approved. I spoke with the most recent conversion that's farther down south on Main Street. I spent 45 minutes with somebody who came off the street yesterday. They're looking at purchasing a building, and I went through the whole thing with them. They understood it. They're going to do retail, but we don't hide the ball. We've been really, really clear. I'm straightforward. I'm disappointed to hear what I heard, but you need to know what happened. Also, really excited to hear the input about sort of this synergy of uses around Main Street, but we want to encourage people to follow this because things that are in the code that's going to come forward, it might not be obvious how important they are. There's a parking code revision that could be a real game changer for getting mixed use to pencil out and to actually fit on some of our small challenging sites. And in addition to that professional sort of population that we heard about, downtown needs to become a neighborhood where people live. There aren't very many people living in downtown, and that is absolutely key in work that folks who study downtowns recommend. I've watched it change in other cities. There are things in this code that will support that. So this code that's coming forward is not the end-all be-all of what you've heard. We're going to follow it later after the land use plan update with the town center plan, which we've just submitted a grant funding application for. So this is ongoing. This is a process, and we're happy to keep working with people on it. And then Catherine has one more thing.
Jill reminded me that there was a public comment about use of eminent domain and takings concerns, and I just want to be very clear that what you did this evening and what will be ultimately before the Planning Commission and then ultimately before you is no government action, and that the state law, as I mentioned, is actually quite protective of property rights. And so we are, as Councilor Brownstone indicated, going to be quite mindful of those, restrictions of state law. But certainly, this is no, action by the city to acquire anybody's property. Now you may adjourn.
Thank you all. We appreciate your concerns about making downtown more vibrant. Yeah, thank you. This meeting is adjourned.